Hi, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon session on day one of the C3EB Summit. I truly apologize. We are running late, and it's because I lost track of time. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who joined us earlier today, you've seen Dr. Rehan Lakhani, Naturopathic Doctor, on our panel earlier today. And Dr. Rehan is back for this solo session to talk to all of us about addressing anxiety among immigrant populations. And for those of us who may be joining just the session now or watching this replay later, again, a little bit about Dr. Rehan. Dr. Rehan Lakhani is a registered naturopathic doctor dedicated to providing evidence-based and preventative naturopathic treatments for anxiety and digestive health concerns. Dr. Lakhani obtained his Bachelor of Health Sciences with honors from the University of Western Ontario and thereafter completed his doctorate in naturopathic medicine from the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in Toronto, Ontario. He has completed internships at the Robert Schad Naturopathic Clinic, Queen West Central Toronto Community Healthcare, the Brampton Civic Hospital, and Holistic Healing Arts. Dr. Lakhani is also certified by the International Society of Sports Nutrition. Alongside his practice, Dr. Lakhani is a regional educator for Nature's Way or Integrative Therapeutics and has served on the board of directors of the Ontario Association for Naturopathic Doctors. So it is with utmost pleasure and true honor that I invite Dr. Rehan Lakhani back to the C3EB platform to talk to us about health and natural ways of maintaining our health and anxiety levels, which is going to be especially useful for me over the next couple of days. So with that in mind, Dr. Lakhani, please take it away and welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for organizing this, hosting this, and having me on this. It's been such a pleasure being on the panel this morning and now leading this workshop. So as Dr. AJ mentioned, my name is Dr. Rehan Lakhani. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm here to talk to you about anxiety and how it manifests in immigrant population, especially in Western countries, and particularly how it manifests in the workplace and then translates to their health. So I just want to cover what naturopathic medicine is very briefly. I'm a naturopathic doctor, which means that I use treatments that revolve around lifestyle, nutrition, diet changes, acupuncture, botanical medicine, and many other natural treatments to address and treat the root cause of disease. I have a practice in a town called Collingwood, Ontario, that's in Canada. And I focus on treating anxiety within my patient population. And I ended up in this position. First, I was really focused on treating cardiovascular disease and weight loss, but I ended up treating anxiety because after seeing hundreds and hundreds of patients, what I realized was that when you look at the root cause for why they're experiencing certain symptoms or experiencing chronic conditions, a lot of it goes back to anxiety and chronic stress. So that's what I target my practice and focus my practice on now. Lastly, I'm also a first-generation immigrant. So my parents moved to Canada from, first they moved from India to Pakistan and then moved to Canada from Pakistan. So I was born in Pakistan, grew up here in Toronto, Canada. So I want to start with a personal story on that note. So my parents had just moved to Canada, and when I was young, I was about 6 or 8 years old at the time. I remember my mom, who was at the time working night shifts at a retail store, coming home crying. As a kid, I didn't know what was going on, but what I did hear was her speaking to my dad about what was going on. She spoke about how much she disliked the cold in this new country, how much it was such a difficult and such an uphill battle for her to figure out the new systems and the new culture in this country, how much she disliked using public transit, especially at night, to go to her job, to go to work and come back. And on top of all that, how isolated she felt at work. So you might be thinking, she's isolated because she's new, because she maybe doesn't speak the language. Actually, that's not the case. She spoke English very well. She still obviously speaks English very well. She actually felt isolated because her coworkers actively avoided her, did not speak to her, and in fact had conversations amongst each other that included speaking about her in a discriminatory way. And this was all within earshot of her. So needless to say, as a kid, this was a very painful and eye-opening experience for me because it's still with me to this day. And over the course of the following years and decades, I began to see all of these systemic issues take a toll on her health. So it took a toll on her health, as it does for so many people, in predominantly mental health. So increased anxiety, increased depression. For some people, it might look like increased PTSD as well. And I experienced this firsthand, seeing this with someone that I love. So chronic stress, isolation, and loneliness, all of that manifested as mental health conditions for her. In addition to that, when you look at research and when you see the rates of this compounded over time, over many years, even many decades, it can result in things like physical conditions. So things like autoimmune disease, things like inflammatory diseases, neurological diseases. So a lot of times when you think that it's just a mental condition, a mental issue, over time, if it's not addressed, it can turn into physical conditions as well. And I saw this with my mom too. So it's now years later, I'm now a healthcare provider, and I see this pattern occurring time and time again in patients who belong to minority communities or to immigrant populations, especially if they are newer immigrant populations. So you're new in a country, brand new in a country, you're surrounded by a culture that's unfamiliar to you, systems that are unfamiliar to you, and oftentimes you're working in a field that's foreign to you. So a lot of immigrant families are brought to Canada or the States under the pretense of, you have these credentials, we need to backfill positions such as engineering positions, accounting positions, healthcare positions, and so on. But oftentimes when immigrants arrive into that Western country, into Canada or the United States, those positions are not available and they don't end up working in their fields. So everything is foreign to you, everything is very new to you. Research actually states that income discrimination and devaluation of foreign credentials exists in Canada. So this is a very research-proven fact, and I'm sure in the States it's mirrored as well. And recertification systems, so when you first come into this new country, and you're looking for recertification systems to make your credentials equivalent to what you need to start working and practicing in your field, those systems actually favor people with Canadian education, training, and work experience. So it's kind of a double whammy, and there's a lot of research to prove this as well. So what does a newcomer to the country do? Well, a lot of people don't have the luxury or the time to pursue further credentials in their field, or they have dependents to look after, so children, aging parents, a spouse, and so on. So they don't have the ability to go back to school and to get those credentials again in this new country. So what they end up doing is getting whatever job that they can get so they can make ends meet and just live. So the barriers that are faced by immigrant folks can be very difficult in terms of foreign credential recognition, adaptation to different cultural and linguistic environments, especially in the workplace. And again, in the workplace, dismissal of education and experience obtained abroad can be very difficult to have experience as well. Increased experiences of discrimination also happen in the workplace, and significantly lower initial earnings are experienced by immigrant workers compared to native-born residents. So all of those things are things that I've had personal experience with, that I've noticed within now my patient population as well. So you've got all of these things I just spoke about. In addition to that, you've got the compounding effects of a brand new country, brand new cultures, brand new way of life, basically, and an unfamiliar workplace, unfamiliar work itself, and they're all stacked against you. So let's take a minute and let's talk about what the health impacts all of this has on people. So we know that according to the World Health Organization, employment is recognized as a social determinant of health. And what do I mean by social determinant of health? Well, we know things like eating unhealthy food affects our health, of course, our physical health. But social determinants of health are things like, how is your social support network? Do you have connections within your community? Do you have access to resources, financial or otherwise? So all of those things are also determinants of health, and the World Health Organization has determined that employment is one of them as well. Employment provides income for health expenditures, and we all know that. And we're very lucky in Canada to have a healthcare system that's publicly funded. But even in addition to that, there are costs that are related to your health too. And work provides self-identification as well. Whereas the lack of employment has been found to correlate with poor health outcomes. And studies have also shown that changes to an individual's employment, so when you're moving from one profession and one type of employment to another, possibly to another that's sort of seen as a lower on the socioeconomic scale, it can really have psychological impacts for people. And exclusion within the workforce does create material deprivation as well, isolation, marginalization, everything that we just spoke about, and it diminishes your sense of self-efficacy, your self-confidence, which then results in it being a huge risk factor for your mental health. So all of those things, add into that, you're not necessarily, again, working in your field, you're working in a completely different field where you don't have much expertise, and so you might be discriminated against for that. And so not having meaningful employment can impact your health too. So all of those things start stacking up and start really contributing to negative health outcomes. So when I speak about negative health outcomes, what do I mean exactly? There are a bunch of disease processes that I see in practice that are not just mental health related. So yes, I do see a lot of mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, even PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and so on. But all of these risk factors and these compounded risk factors can lead to things like autoimmune diseases. So what do I mean by that? Things like thyroiditis, things like rheumatoid arthritis, things like inflammatory bowel disease. All of those things either, this chronic stress and underlying anxiety can contribute to causing them or making the symptoms even worse. You can also see neurological conditions, so difficulty sleeping or insomnia, chronic migraines, multiple sclerosis. Those are just a few examples of the neurological conditions that can be caused. Inflammatory conditions are a big one too. So inflammatory bowel disease, IBS or irritable bowel syndrome as well. Any sort of joint pain such as arthritis or gout, or even worsening of previous injuries or previous issues that you might have had. So not only that, we discuss chronic and chronic stress and anxiety disturbing normal physiological processes too. So all of your physiological and biological processes are very interconnected. So when we go through conditions of chronic stress and anxiety, for example, due to our workplace and workplace discrimination, it can result in physiological systems shifting too. So one of these things is your circadian rhythm can shift. So that'll cause disturbances in not just sleep, but your energy throughout the day. So you might notice, it doesn't matter how much sleep you get, you're just tired throughout the entire day. You just feel exhausted all the time to the bone. It can also disrupt hormonal processes. So things like, it's commonly known as the stress hormone cortisol. So things like cortisol have a natural pattern in the body where they're higher in the morning when you first wake up. They slowly fall throughout the day and they plateau off in the afternoon around 3. Then they fall a little bit more towards the evening and towards the night. And so you are able to sleep. And then throughout the course of the night while you're sleeping, they start to come back up. So that's the natural rhythm of cortisol. Now, when you are under chronic stress or when you do experience chronic anxiety, that rhythm can be thrown off altogether. So when I run tests for this, I see people come in with cortisol that's just tanked. It's just flat throughout the day. And so how do you think this person would feel, right? This person is exhausted all the time, has no energy to do anything, has no joy in the things that used to bring them joy previously, and it starts to mimic symptoms of depression. Cortisol is also really intricately connected to all of our other hormones in the body, melatonin being one of them. So again, sleep is impacted very much so. Also reproductive hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and so on are all impacted. Another physiological process that can be disturbed by this chronic stress and anxiety pattern is neurotransmitter production and distribution. So we know neurotransmitters that are created in the brain to send messages and signals all throughout the body to help us feel feelings of joy or feelings of happiness or even feelings of sadness, anger, worry, and so on. All of those neurotransmitters, their balance is thrown off. Sometimes your body makes too much of them, sometimes it doesn't make enough of them. And so again, you can mimic symptoms of depression or anxiety because of that. Lastly, our metabolisms are thrown off as well with chronic stress and anxiety. So by metabolism, I don't just mean how fast you can lose weight, but metabolism in the sense that our thyroid hormones are impacted. Our thyroid hormone has a huge amount of control over our metabolism. And so the health results of this are things like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, weight gain, diabetes, or even drastic weight loss for some people. So all of those things, and I just think about the high cholesterol, the diabetes, and high blood pressure, all of those things are very prevalent in the South Asian community. And it makes me question what is the root cause of these things that occur in this population. So as a naturopathic doctor, when I see these conditions, I treat the symptoms, for sure. That's the first thing that I do so that people get relief and get some sense of normalcy back. But I also aim to address and treat the root cause. So you always have to ask why. Why do your joints hurt? Why are you inflamed? Why is this happening to your body? What is the root cause of it? And oftentimes it comes back to it's stress, it's anxiety, it's chronic stress or anxiety. It's because of my lifestyle. And so why is your lifestyle the way it is? Well, I work a lot and I'm stressed a lot at work. So a lot of these things come back to chronic stress and anxiety. So it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to say to someone, you just need to quit your job because that's the root cause of your health condition. And by you quitting your job, you'll feel better and you'll be healthy, no problem. It's really difficult to say that to someone, especially when they're in a situation where their job is literally supporting their whole family, right? Whether it be if they have dependents or not, or whether they live with their parents or not. So the next best thing that we can do is address the systemic issue within workplaces themselves. Now, this isn't to say that workplaces are the only causes of chronic stress and anxiety, but they're a big one because if you think about it, we spend a lot of time at work, right? Up to 40 hours even. And sometimes when you are a new immigrant to a new country and you're trying to make ends meet, sometimes you have 2 jobs, sometimes you have 3. You just do what you have to do to make ends meet and make it work. And so how do we address this systemic issue of discrimination that leads to chronic stress and anxiety in the workplace? What can we do? So in terms of the research that I've looked at, there are 3 major things that you can do. So the first thing is improving the social structure in the workplace. So, new immigrants being new to a country, they shouldn't be responsible for addressing systemic issues in the workplace. So things like devaluing of credentials, discrimination, no policies that exist on anti-discrimination, having unequal opportunities and racism and unequal pay within the workplace. It's not up to the immigrant and the person who is experiencing these things to address them. It's up to the organization to address them. So improving the social system and the social structure in the workplace will help in doing that. So organizations need to create a culture of social inclusion rather than social exclusion. And so what I mean by that is having the ability to access trainings, policies, even personnel. So having someone that a new employee, if they're an immigrant, can go to discuss their concerns with someone, making it a very open, transparent, communicative culture in the workplace so that the social system can be addressed at the grassroots level. The second thing that research says is really important is having access to culturally appropriate services, including access to healthcare providers within the workplace. So here in Canada, a lot of organizations have a program called the Employee Assistance Program. And what this is it's access to therapists, to counselors, mental health professionals that workers can take advantage of if they're experiencing certain discrimination in the workplace or certain chronic stressors in the workplace and so on. The problem with this is that a lot of these therapists and counselors might come from a background that is privileged, that is predominantly white. And so when you're a new immigrant in a new country and you're trying to seek out these services from your workplace, you might not feel comfortable speaking to someone who is not well versed in your culture and the way that your culture works. I saw a great quote online that someone posted in one of the Facebook groups that I follow, and I'll read it out to you. So it says, "More South Asians need to get into mental health professions because I can't take white Stacy's advice of, I need to communicate more with my parents anymore." So it's just a really, simple example of when you don't have the cultural background and the knowledge of these cultural practices as a mental health professional or a healthcare professional, it makes it very difficult for people to seek you out and seek out services from you because they might not feel comfortable or they might not know how to tell you that the advice that you're giving them or the treatments that you're giving them will not work for them. So it's really, really important to have access to culturally appropriate healthcare within workplaces and outside of workplaces too, but specifically if there are workplace wellness programs, to have that in place. If healthcare providers need to deliver culturally relevant healthcare, and it's up to those organizations to support their diverse employees in the workplace to access these services. So again, making sure that if you are offering workplace wellness programs, workplace health related programs like this EAP program in Canada, make sure there's a culturally diverse range of providers that you have. Lastly, we need to improve support in workplaces and within unions so that people feel more comfortable reaching out to their managers or their unions in their organizations. So immigrants face a brand new set of social and cultural rules. More often than not, we are not familiar with what the rules are, what the nuances are within the society and culture that we've just recently settled into, the customs that they need to adapt to. And so therefore, keeping this in mind, employers should learn to be more proactive in helping ease this transition process. Sure, there's an argument to be made that this is not the employer's job, but at the end of the day, when you think about the bottom line, which is the most important thing to any business, you want this proactive approach with any issue, including this issue, to make sure that your workers are well supported, they're productive, and they are able to contribute as much as they can. So leaders can do this by providing training programs, focusing on readjustment, and by consistently providing constructive feedback and support. So imagine, having a program or a training module for a new immigrant who starts working at your workplace, allowing them to learn about these different cultural practices, these different cultural norms, these different systemic practices that are prevalent in the workplace and in society at large, having a transition program for that. So it's really easy for them to meld into and integrate into the workplace and in society in a way that's healthy for them and therefore more beneficial for the organization and the workplace itself. So overall, this sort of program would lessen the blow per se and reduce those feelings of devaluation, those feelings of rejection in the workplace, those feelings of workplace exclusion. So having that transition program and a support within the workplace and within unions, if unions are present in your workplace, having that is so important. So, I completely understand, and I've said it before, I understand that this is not just all on the employer, but it is a big part, a big role that the employer can play in making sure that their workers, whether they be immigrant workers or not, are well supported, are well taken care of in the workplace, so that overall, at the end of the day, it contributes to a more positive bottom line. In addition to that, health providers such as myself, policymakers, organizational leaders, and government structures as well need to orchestrate all of these changes together. So we all need to work together to make that happen. But we can't forget that many folks are spending the majority of their time at work. So like I mentioned before, and as the evidence states, as research states, a discriminatory environment leads to negative health outcomes. And at the end of the day, that does affect your bottom line. So as organizations, as employees, as health providers, and in general, as people, we need to take it upon ourselves to make sure we're asking the right questions and we're implementing the right policies, trainings, courses, wellness programs to deliver culturally competent, equitable workplaces and create a workplace culture that values that mindset, that culturally competent mindset amongst our colleagues and our management as well. It's not just going to be felt within your organization, it's going to be felt within your the people that you serve, your customer base as well. And when there is that open, transparent, communicative mindset present in the culture of the organization, it's felt. And believe me, it does impact your bottom line in a very, very positive way. And we have lots of research proving that. And that's it for me. I don't know if Dr. AJ is on right now, but yeah, there she is.
I've been here. I've been just commenting
Excellent.
on the side.
Okay.
No, this was so amazing. And I just want to take this moment to, oh, she's going to absolutely hate me that I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's my mother. What you see in the comments, I believe that is my mother's first ever public comment.
Oh, wow.
Ever.
Amazing.
Ever. Yeah. So I've been like, whoa, so this is definitely a lot of firsts. And yes, we wish we knew this information when we came to this country. I think, Dr. Rehan, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, that immigrant journey. And it's so funny you brought up that transition, because I have that transition program, that's a transition program that I run, because interestingly enough, my expertise is in acculturation, is in that cultural transition and change management process. And so it really, really, everything that you said resonated with me so deeply. I was just on the background listening to everything, and especially, hiring representatives who understand our journey better than Stacy or Tracy or Karen. That really resonates with me so much, because I have actually had, as I was going through grad school, and I was, I was the first Indian American person to be admitted into that department and program in its history.
Oh, wow.
And the only one.
Wow.
At that time. So as we talked about, in the panel earlier today, that comes with its own set of pressures. In addition to those pressures, it was a predominantly white department, with, a couple of token representatives, I suppose. But in terms of the student population and the faculty, it was, I believe for a while, I was actually the only person of color in any sort.
Wow.
Yeah. And with that, so I literally for a while had various people telling me I should divorce my family and my parents.
Wow.
And that I should not study Indian American psychology, that I should not study immigrant psychology. I had journals reject my articles because they weren't in the tracks that are being, that are more popular along the lines of, self-esteem and like blah, 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 whatever else. Which I know I'm coming off as condescending, sort of, but great, they have their tracks, but it's like, this track is valuable too. But this was a time when I was one of 5 people in America studying Indian Americans.
That's incredible.
5 people in the whole country in psychology studying this. Wow. In a very, very visible way. And this was only 2005 to 2012.
Whew.
That wasn't that long ago.
Not at all. Not at all. That is incredible.
Yeah. So everything you've said, especially when it comes to South Asians, immigrant populations, it is so critical for us to get that culturally competent care. What are, and I went on that whole tangent to really flip it around and come back to this. You always know I come back to a question, which that. You do that too. So
I do that too. Yeah, totally.
What do you think if for companies who are listening to this conversation, now or later, and they say, it's just 2 voices, we don't need to. What are they really leaving on the table when they don't give culturally competent anything. Operations care, all of it.
Yeah. Well, again, so I always go back to research because that's kind of what my career revolves around too. And when you look at the research, you are leaving behind tons of talent, opportunity, contributing to your bottom line. And again, from a business standpoint, I know this is really big and important for people. And so when you're leaving that behind, you're not just leaving it behind by having talent in the workplace, but by sort of excluding a population of the customer base that you can serve. Right. And like I said in my presentation, when you have this open, culturally competent, very inclusive atmosphere within your workplace, it's noticed and it's felt. And your customers, the customers that really want to work with you, will reach out to you and work with you. So at the end of the day, if it comes down to bottom line, you're abandoning and leaving behind a massive population that you can be serving and that can be profiting off of. If anything, just that alone should be the reason for why you include have these conversations. But in addition to that, you talk about on the panel this morning, we spoke about how much talent and how much knowledge and how much contributions that these people have made, these professionals have made in their respective careers. Why would you want to leave that behind? They'll contribute to advancing your mission, your values, your goals, your everything. Your business can go really far with so many different people who are talented in their respective fields, but also have this diversity background backing them up. So lots to be left behind.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's for sure. I want to ask you one more question before we start, sort of wrapping this up with your final thoughts is, I think, and this actually came up in our panel earlier too, because when you talked about your parents' experiences and how you witnessed them and the outcomes, the inequitable outcomes that they had to face, be a victim of, really. Mm-hmm. And I don't think many people realize how much that they not standing, when they don't stand up for these things, or they don't know how, it also affects, especially in immigrant populations. I'm talking about, especially in South Asian immigrant populations, everything that our parents go through, everything that our parents sacrifice for us, everything that they give up for us to get affects us, no matter how much we show it or not, because all of us go through the brat phase. I think that's like a South Asian trait. I really don't know anybody who hasn't gone through that, but it still affects us. And how do we change the narrative for our kids?
Oh man, that is loaded, but a very good question, because there is such a thing as intergenerational trauma. Mm-hmm. And picking up and moving your life from one culture, one tradition that's been part of your ancestral heritage for so many years, and moving to a completely different area, completely different country, completely different continent with different cultures, customs, people that look different. Everything's different. And on top of that, adding on to it, you don't really necessarily have your family or community support that you would have back at home. All of that is considered trauma. It's traumatizing to do that. And by our parents sacrificing and working so hard and just pushing through all of these struggles, that trauma passes on to us. And you see a lot of this with the first generation, sometimes even the second generation, where they're just pushing through everything because they have to be the best. They have to excel at everything. They have to get the best grades. They have to get the most degrees. They have to be the most successful person in their field of expertise. And that amount of pressure comes from knowing that your parents have sacrificed so much and wanting to be the best so that you can give back and you can show them, that you should be proud of me. You didn't do this for no reason. So it's a really, really tricky thing to not pass that on to the next generation, onto your kids. But I think one of the most important things you can do is to acknowledge and work on that within yourself. So by even having this conversation and acknowledging the fact that it has impacted me to this day and still does, having that conversation and that knowledge about yourself is super important. And then going out and seeking the right kind of help that you need to address that trauma. And obviously it's not just going to go away, but you're going to learn how to cope with it. You're going to learn how to not allow it to impact so many areas of your life. You're going to learn how to be a little bit more independent and make decisions based on what you want, not what your family and what your parents want. And so by changing that narrative yourself, you're becoming more aware and knowledgeable about how not to pass it on to the next generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that one thing I would add on there is that I think even the parents' generation has to do their work to sort of do a little bit of that letting go, that it's okay. I know, again, my mom is going to literally, I don't know what she's going to tell me on the phone after this. I'm waiting for it. Mom, I'm ready because I know you're listening. But one of the things that I know I constantly remind my parents of, because they come, they because of their sacrifices and because they are so protective, that they did move an entire family into a completely different culture, into this scary environment that we've never been exposed to, and it's just supposed to, and then of course the model minority myth of we're expected to be the best of the best, be affluent, be super rich immediately, blah, 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 all of this other stuff. And uncle so-and-so's kid is doing this and auntie so-and-so's kid is doing that. Of course, we go through all of that. And I constantly have to, there was a time, not now, but in the past, a time where I had to literally tell my parents, hey, great, I don't, you don't trust me. Great. Yes, I actively break all your rules. And I do that with my eyes open to piss you off, because that's me. Great. However, don't forget, you've still raised me. You gotta trust that. You gotta just let that go of, at the end of the day, the values that I have, no matter how much I'm acting out, the core values I have been instilled in me over the course of my entire lifetime because of you, not in spite of you.
Completely agree. I mean, I'm the exact same way. I'll say, these are your rules. I don't really want to listen to them. I'll just do my own thing. But,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like when you say it that way to your parents, and when you say that these values are values that you've brought me up with, I think they really appreciate that, because they are values of independence, of strength, of courage, of compassion, and serving your community. And all of those values are so important. So it doesn't matter how many rules, sometimes arbitrary rules, you break. As long as you have these core values that reflect who you are as a person, and that person is a quote unquote good person looking back at you, it's okay. It's okay to let go.
Absolutely. And I think, this was my way of like therapizing my parents unofficially, because it got to the point where in my family, they don't actually give me rules, because they know that if it comes out of their mouth, you have to, let me test that.
Yeah.
So those words these days actually never get uttered in my family, because even now, if anybody says you have to, okay, challenge accepted. But at the same time, it really is that resilience, which I think, that it's almost like that cultural transmission that comes, along with the intergenerational trauma. We also get that intergenerational resilience. We also get that intergenerational determination, that grit, that perseverance. It does not matter how many times you fall, you get back up. It's almost like that, Lagan theme in the back of your head going all along.
Yeah.
But in some ways, it's kind of beautiful because it keeps you determined and it keeps you going. So this, and it's really, I have to acknowledge one thing. it is really nice and reaffirming and grounding to be able to have this type of a conversation publicly on a recording on a summit platform with another South Asian who truly gets it, where I don't have to change my narrative. I don't have to change the context of how I'm explaining the details of my family life and all of that by virtue of our cultural representation. When I talk about these things, you understand the nuances.
Agreed.
You know, and that is culturally competent care for me.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's so critical. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you for having me and hosting this entire summit.
Oh, this is the first of so many. So we are looking forward to having you back and having more of these conversations and giving people more insights. And, you know, I really, really, really appreciate all of this. So what are your final thoughts on all of it?
Well, for anyone who is watching who is of South Asian descent or otherwise and is new to the country and is experiencing some of these things that we spoke about in the workplace, know that there is access to care around you. You just have to look for it and reach out to the right people. So you're not isolated, you're not alone, you're not going to go through this on your own. There are healthcare practitioners out there and managers and leaders and community leaders and otherwise out there that can help you, guide you through this process. Just don't wait. Reach out now, because like I said, all of these things compound year after year after year to result in health effects that you don't want. And when they turn into chronic health effects, it's really hard to reverse them. So address it now, address it early, be proactive, and be preventative.
Yeah, that's great. And I do think it needs to be said, like, you know, even in the cases of immigrants who've been here for 25 years or whatever, who haven't addressed it, it's never too late. You know, this is not a message of warning. I think for Dr. Rehan and me, this is a message of hope that these conversations are happening now. So join the conversation. You're going to be included. Your voice is going to be heard and your needs are going to be addressed. And we are here for you. So don't hesitate.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Dr. Rehan. And you know I'm going to be messaging you after all of this is done for like decompress. So we'll talk soon and we'll plan the next stuff.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone listening, and we will see each other soon.
Yep.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.